And I can share my screen. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
Perfect. All right, so it looks like we have 9 attendees so far, so I'm just going to wait a couple more minutes before we start the webinar for folks that are already here. So probably at 12:02 that we will start. Hey T, thanks for joining us. We're starting in 1 minute. We're just giving everybody a chance to log on. All right. So we can officially start. So thanks for joining everybody. This is another round of our Ask an Eevee owner webinar. And so just some housekeeping things before we fully get started is that you'll notice that all panelists have their microphones on and also their webcams on, so you will see who's talking and what they look like and all that, so it'll help with some confusion. But you as an attendee will be muted, so if you have questions, which we encourage you to do, please put them in the questions box, and then I will I'll ask them of all the panelists as we go on through the presentation. So without further ado, yeah, so I am the moderator today. My name is Devin DeLibero. I am the Energy Program Coordinator with Green Energy Consumers, and I work on our Drive Green program. If you haven't heard of Green Energy Consumers before, we are a renewable energy nonprofit based in Rhode Island and Massachusetts, whose mission it is to harness the power of energy consumers to speed the transition to a low carbon future. And one of the main ways we do that is our Drive Green program. The Drive Green program acts as an educational resource to folks who are interested in electric vehicles, and it's also a way to facilitate the actual purchasing or leasing of an electric vehicle through the dealers that we have in our network that agree to offer fixed monthly discounts for folks who sign up on our website for a test drive. So if you have any questions about that, save them to the end, or feel free to reach out to me via email. And I know that a lot of folks here are calling in from New England, but I think we might have some folks from our Drive Green with National Grid program, so welcome. But other than that, we are going to go right to the speakers. We're going to have everybody introduce themselves, tell us what car they have, and maybe tell us why they made the switch to an EV. So Ivy, if you wouldn't mind starting us off.
Sure thing. I'm Ivy Washington. In 2018, I was ready to make a car switch, and I had a condo that actually had a plug in the driveway. And so I think I had gone to some events through Drive Green and sort of started thinking, oh, this might actually be a good option for me. I don't have a long commute. Maybe this would work. And I started doing test driving and ended up loving the Bmw i3. So I have that. It is REX, which means range extender. So it does have a gas component where it recharges the battery. So if people have questions about that, I'm happy to talk about that. But I did try to test drive a bunch of cars, looked at a bunch of options, and there were lots of options out there, but also it was super helpful to have the Drive Green piece to navigate some of the dealership stuff and find out about options that maybe weren't readily available. That's my story. I got my car. I leased it in December of 2018.
Great. Peter, you're next.
Hi, Peter Viner Brown. I got my first electric vehicle, which was a Ford Focus Eevee in 2015, and had that for 3 years. And it was an interesting car. It would do about 80 miles, much better than I thought it would be. It was a fun thing to drive. And then after having that for 3 years, I got my Nissan LEAF through Green Energy's discount program. And the reason I changed was because of the safety features. I think Nissan has a lot of safety features. The Focus, unfortunately, didn't. So the car is, I've had it for almost, well, 3 years. It will be next June, so I'll be on to something new in June. It does about 150 miles, a bit more in the summer, which is more than enough for me. And so, yes, I'm a definite convert to electric vehicles and can't imagine driving another gasoline car. When I drive my wife's car, I realize just how crude and rude the thing is compared to an electric. So no more gasoline cars.
Perfect. John, you're next.
Hi, I'm John Fitzmaurice. I own a Chevy Bolt. I actually have two, and I had one before that. All of them I got through the Green Energy Consumers group. The first electric car I drove was a Volkswagen e-Golf. Just happened to be going to the mall, and they had a bunch of the cars, a bunch of Volkswagens there, and they said, "Would you like to give this a try?" And I did. I was hooked at the silence and the pickup. The only thing holding me back on the Golf was that the range really wasn't there, so I waited another year, and I got my 2017 in January, and that's already back at the dealership it was a lease. In the meantime, I got a 2019 for my wife, and then I picked up when I traded my 2017, and I got a 2020. The range, I think, is 238 miles on the 2019, and the 2020 is 259 miles. And it seems to be, that's the EPA rating, that seems to be true on average.
Great. Rod, you are next.
Okay, so back in 2015, I bought a VW Golf TDI diesel. Got burned by Dieselgate. That really pissed me off and sort of motivated me to look more at electric options. So when VW bought that back, I leased a Chevy Volt with the V, the plug-in hybrid. And that one, the thing about that, similar to what Peter was saying, is that when the gas engine kicked in, it was just awful. Not that it was really any worse than other gas cars, but it really made me appreciate when it was driving on electric. So then when the lease was on that was up, I bought a Tesla Model 3, and I've been driving that for about a year now. And just, love how silent it is. And as others have said, the pickup, especially at low speeds, it can be great to get into traffic and that sort of thing. So that's what I'm doing.
Perfect. ET. Oh, ET, you're muted. Oh, there you go. Maybe. Hold on. ET, you're still muted. Let me see. It looks like you're not muted. Try again.
How about now?
Okay, there we go.
You hear me?
I think it might be your headphones. All right, we're gonna skip ET for now. ET owns a Nissan LEAF, and she's actually, she works for Green Energy Consumers, and so I roped her into this. So she's a participant, but I did rope her in. Okay, we'll go with Xavier next.
Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Xavier. I'm a mechanical engineer, and last year I was I had a Chevy Malibu that had a series of transmission problems where I had to get the transmission replaced, and then later on the controls went bad. So the car was basically totaled, and you know, I was now at a point where I was considering either like dumping more money into the car or like getting a new car. So my decision was mostly based off of environmental impact. So I was, you know, looking at EVs out there, and yeah, like even though like I lived in an apartment where I had to do a lot of like guerrilla like style charging and didn't really have a place to charge at my own apartment, like I still kind of figured it out. And I've had a Chevy Bolt since July of last year, so yeah, it's been fun. And like it's like the other day I drove a Chevy Malibu that was a bit newer. It was like a 2018 or something, and you know, similar. I mean, it's a mid-sized sedan, but just like it felt like such like a like it felt like super heavy just driving it. It was insane. Like the difference between like the zippiness between EVs versus like internal combustion engine vehicles is like it's night and day. But yeah, it's been a good time.
Well, I'm glad you figured it out with living in an apartment and everything. I'm sure folks will want to know more about that too.
Yeah, yeah.
ET, can you speak, or are we still having audio issues?
You tell me. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can hear you.
All right. Hey, Devin. Hey, everyone. As Devin mentioned, I'm the Marketing and Communications Director at Green Energy Consumers Alliance. Super proud to work at this great organization. I've been there for 10 years. And so biased, but Drive Green is an excellent program. I entered the electric car world to start at the beginning. In 2014, I had twins. And then we knew we needed a car for the twins. So we bought a big, giant sedan, and I hated it. And in 2016, Green Energy Consumers launched Drive Green, and I started to get to learn a lot more about electric cars, work with partners who wanted to promote electric cars. I had a pretty new car in my life and wasn't sure if I wanted to swap it out yet. But as I talked to people who owned EVs and just kind of learned with my friends at work, I realized that the most cost-effective decision I could make was to switch. So we went for the Nissan LEAF, and we got it at the end of 2018. And it was an awesome car. We loved it. I have twin girls, and they go around and they do stuff, and we regularly travel to New Hampshire to see my parents and drive all over the world going apple picking and things like that. My husband and I don't usually drive to work because we both work in the city and we live in Arlington, so not too far from Boston. But you know, when we do, you know, it's great to be able to do that because I never wanted to drive to work before in a gas powered car, so I feel a little better about that. But then what happened is a driver who was high on opioids hit us last October, and like really smashed into us. And my crazy story is that that car protected us. The whole family was in the car, and we were all safe. We all got out. We all didn't have a scratch on us. We were hit from the side, so it was, you know, it could have gone any way. It was really scary. And the best thing that came out of that is we got a Nissan LEAF Plus after that accident, and that goes, so the Nissan LEAF goes about 150 miles. The Plus goes anywhere from 210 to 230 miles, and for us that little extra boost has been really wonderful and helpful. But the 150 miles had also been plenty before that, so that's my story.
There you go. Well, that's also great because I know a lot of people have questions about like safety ratings for EVs and they're concerned whether it's like safe or not to get an EV or safe as a traditional car. So that's a good question, but I do have some other questions coming in. So let's start there. Okay. The first question I have is, have you ever taken long trips with your EV, approximately 700 to 900 mile trips? Please describe your charging experience. Was it easy to find charging stations? Anybody?
Yeah, I have. I drive a Model 3, so it's a little different from some of the others because the Model 3 uses Tesla's supercharger network, and Teslas can charge a little faster than most other EVs on the market right now. But I was not slowed down at all by driving my Tesla because mine has theoretically 325 miles of range, so I could drive more than I would normally drive in one sitting. Pull over, plug in, get something to eat, and then by the time I was done eating, the car had more than enough range to reach my next planned stopping point. So it was absolutely no problem for me. But then the caveat is, what is your road trip style? If you like to just, get in the car and put on the adult diapers and drive for 600 miles straight, then an EV will not do it for you. But if, like most people, you're kind of sane and you stop every couple hours to take a break and, eat and not fall asleep, then an EV will be good, with the caveat that you got to get an EV that has decent DC fast charging, which increasingly they do, but some of the older ones don't. So that's my experience and my advice on that.
How about for the non-Tesla owners? Any experience?
Well, the furthest I've ever driven is from Boston to Brooklyn, and went on a single charge on the Bolt. I just wanted to see if I could do it, be like Charles Lindbergh myself, right? See if I can go on one tank. So made it fine. I had about 10 miles to spare, so and plugged it in and spent the day. I was moving my son into his apartment, so I spent the day with my son and then just drove back. The whole trip was about $7 round trip, which was great. And since then, that was in 2017. Since then, there are more and more charging stations available between Boston and New York. Lots of choices to stop at with fast charging. And like Rod said, we have bio breaks and we like to eat too. So I just plug in and go somewhere and eat. And I don't really notice that I have an electric car versus a gas-powered car. Then again, I don't travel very long distances. If I do, I've gone out to Western Mass. I stay at a hotel that has a charger. I always look for them and then just plug in and you finish the trip.
So what apps do you guys use to find charging station? Is it like ChargePoint, PlugShare? Like, what's your preference?
PlugShare.
PlugShare?
Crowdsourced, so it has a lot more charges by different companies on it. But I use them all.
Yeah,
for local stuff, or when I'm on a. Sorry, go ahead.
ET, go ahead.
I use both. I use both, ChargePoint and PlugShare. Sometimes I find that like PlugShare is crowdsourced, yeah, and there's little details like, hey, I was here yesterday and it wasn't open. Whereas ChargePoint sometimes has more stuff on it because it's got it's marking down lots of ones that you pay for, lots of different ones that you would pay for. Well, lots of them are free, some you pay for. So I use.
Okay.
And you can just ask the car too. If you have Google, you can ask it to navigate to the nearest electric vehicle charging station. It will take you there. But like ET's saying, it's not going to tell you that it's broken. So you might want to check that out.
Yeah, Teslas have a built-in app on the car's center console that tells you, where the next supercharger is, and that can be handy. But I was going to say, PlugShare is good for finding local charging, which is not necessarily in the Tesla's app. But another one for long distance travel in particular is a website, and now they've got an app called A Better Route Planner. And that one's fabulous. You tell it what sort of car you've got, and you say, I want to drive from Boston to Cincinnati, and it'll find you a route and say you can charge here, here, and here, and you'll be charging for X number of minutes at this place and Y number of minutes at the next one, and so on. And you don't need to slavishly follow it because it doesn't really take human needs into consideration, but it's very useful for getting an idea of what a road trip would be like in any given model, or for planning a road trip once you're ready to do it.
Wow, that's a great website, man. Like, I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, that's cool. You can adding like your own like make and model, and then going from there.
Devin, there's also BMW has also a loaner program. If there was, I like many of the panelists, don't travel in the 700 to 900 mile range.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But if you were traveling places that didn't have charging stations, BMW, at least when I got my car, allowed you to take out a loaner of a gas-powered car 10 times a year, which obviously would cover a whole lot. So I have done that a couple times where I was driving to New York, and it was just easier and more convenient, and you just schedule it, drop off your car, and then get a loaner. But my experience has been that I've always been able to find charging stations when I needed them, and been able to get to them along my way. It just might take a little more planning.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I didn't realize BMW had that.
Yeah.
My Chevy app has it built in too, but it's kind of in its infancy. This is, I don't know if you can see this, but this is kind of what you probably can't see it. But it's the map, and it shows charging stations, but it's not as good as PlugShare. But if you have a Android, I think an iPhone does it too. Plug it into the USB port, and it'll show up on the 10.5-inch screen in the car. So it will navigate you to places. And what it does differently too is it actually draws a line based on the terrain of how far your car can go, based on, if you're going up a mountain or something like that, you're not going to go as far. So it takes that into account, which is kind of interesting.
Cool. So it sounds like there are plenty of options if you're going on a road trip. You just have to think about it, whether or not you have to plan your trip, or if you can take advantage of a program like Eevee has and actually rent a gas-powered car for some of the longer trips, just for your peace of mind.
Devin, can I just add something? Just like getting philosophical here, guys. When I started driving in an electric car, I started thinking about driving differently, and it wasn't like, oh, I have to think about driving differently. It just sort of happened because your electric car is like really in tune with you. I mean, you're driving in a much more engaged way. You can see like what your battery's doing. You can see what you pressing the accelerator is doing to your battery. You can watch how your car performs in different kinds of weather if you take the same trip a lot, and you start to think different about trips. So you kind of start to think about how you drive, and so like thinking about where you'll charge in advance is kind of really natural, and all these apps make it really easy.
Cool. All right, we're going to move on to our next question. It's also about charging because that's a hot topic. But it's how many of you can charge at home? And if you don't charge at home or you can't, where do you charge? So I know, Xavier, this is a particular question for you.
Yeah, I mean, you want to go first?
I mean, I'm going to put you on the spot, I think.
Yeah, so I do not charge at home. I live in an apartment. And which means that like when I first got my car, I had to do some research as to like where I would be charging. And it turns out there's a charging station at like this parking lot next door to my gym, like the fire station next to the gym that I go to. Whenever I go to like Big Y, like they have EV charging spots over there too, like ChargePoint. Like level 2 chargers. There's also some like public stations like downtown where I live that are maybe like a 5 minute like walk away. And then there's some fast chargers that are next to my work, so that I can use in a pinch. So with all that, like I'm pretty much covered. Like basically, like I'd go to the gym like twice a week or 2 to 3 times a week, and charge for an hour and a half. So that gets me about like 30 miles each time. And that's just just parking. I'm not like going out of my way to like go to a gas station, like or an EV charging station. Like I'm just going to the gym and then parking and then boom, get 30 miles each time. And then I mean my commute's 10 miles each way, so that just about covers me for the week. And then I get like a little bit like whenever I go to the grocery store and stuff like that. Now that all the gyms are closed with like coronavirus and all that, it's been a little bit different, but I've been making it work for over a year now. So
Do you normally pay to charge?
so the stations that I go to are all free public stations, and I don't know if that's like just a policy with the town that I live at. I live in Northampton, and whenever I go to this neighboring town called Amherst, the stations there I do have to pay, but it's not that much. It's like on the order of like, let me pull up the rate. I think it's around 20 cents a kilowatt hour.
That's not too bad either way.
Yeah.
And PlugShare usually tells you how much it costs to charge.
Yeah, and so does ChargePoint. Most of the stations that I use are ChargePoint. They kind of have a large footprint in this area.
So does anybody else mainly charge not at home?
I charge at home because it's, I have a LEAF, so it'll do about 150 miles. But when I leased the LEAF, it came with 2 years of free charging on Eevee Go. I've used them once or twice, but I don't do long trips really. But and I hear the new Volkswagen ID4 will come with 3 years of free usage of the Electrify America charging stations, which Volkswagen had to put in because of Dieselgate. So there's one actually in Providence, I think, at Walgreens, and there's more than one station. So I think as an incentive, a lot of manufacturers are now including so many years of free charging. And I think Tesla, to begin with, you could use their superchargers for nothing, but I'm not sure that got extended to the newer models. But you often see used Teslas advertised with free charging for life that's been grandfathered, which is quite a deal.
Nice.
Yeah, Tesla offered free supercharging with the Model S and the Model X. Then they dropped that with the Model 3 and the Model Y, and also dropped it even for the S and X, but they've kind of brought it back from time to time as an incentive to push cars. So it's, if you're buying a used one, it's worth asking about, but with an S or an X, you might get it. With a 3 or a Y, you almost certainly will not.
How about Ivy? Does BMW have anything like that?
So BMW did have some free charging with Eevee Go. That is another website. We were talking about websites earlier. That is another one that I always have on my phone, just from the Boston area going on the Pike, has some of the fast charging stations, and again, for traveling and those kind of things, it's convenient. So yeah, they definitely had free time on Eevee Go, and those charging stations are another good one to know about, keep track of if you're going long distances or traveling on the Mass Pike.
Great. Sorry, my computer audio got like a little messed up, so I heard we start to talk, and then I know you were still talking, and I don't think everybody else could hear you, so I think that's all that matters.
Good.
Okay, let me see if we have more questions. Let's see. I have someone who's curious about the decrease in range. It says how much of a decrease in range can I expect during heat and cold? So like during winter and during summer. And how about for like if they use bike racks or like fully pack their car, does that make much of a difference with the weight?
Yeah, it does. The range does drop more in cold than in heat, in my experience. Because driving the heaters in the car is generally less efficient than driving the air conditioning. But it depends to some extent on the design of the car, because some cars have heat pumps, and those will be more efficient in cold weather than just a regular, heater coil, which is very inefficient. And then if you're towing or adding stuff, that'll do something terrible to the aerodynamics, and it'll reduce the range too. I don't have exact numbers on that. I know that like worst case scenario in the cold, if it's like 0 degrees Fahrenheit or something, you can lose like maybe a third of the car's range in those sorts of conditions.
I would like to point out there that that's the same with a typical internal combustion engine car. You will lose a good deal of range with the gas car, so it's par for the course.
Yeah, but it's more severe with EVs because EVs are more efficient to begin with. With a gas car, you're losing like 70% of the energy to waste heat, and that's not the case with EVs.
There are things that you can do though to fix that a little bit. In the wintertime, I average about 200 miles on a charge, and unless I put it in the garage, then I get a little bit better. In the summertime, right now, I'm getting over 300 miles on a charge because it loves this weather. But in the wintertime, I'm an IT guy, so I program both of our bolts so that they finish charging when we want to drive them away in the morning. So it's a setting right inside of Chevy. So you say, for example, I want it to be done by 5 o'clock. It doesn't care when I plugged it in. At 5 in the morning, it's going to be fully charged or 80% charged, which is better for the battery. I program it to do that, but I also program it so that it starts the car. If it's in the garage, you don't have emissions, so you can run the motor in the garage. So while it's plugged in, it's running and it's heating up the car. And I do that for like 10, 15 minutes in the wintertime. Then I just get in the car and I turn on the heated steering wheel, turn on the heated seat, turn off the heat, and drive away. And because I've sort of babied it inside of the garage, I still get 200, 220 in the wintertime. Now we have 2 cars, so one person has to be in the driveway. It's only a 1-car garage. And you see a little bit of reduction, probably 200 to 180 to 200 range in the wintertime, but I just keep them plugged in and I program them to warm up before I leave. And if I'm not using heat, my commute's only 10 miles from from Quincy to Mattapan. It's 10 miles. So, in the summertime, I maybe plug in once every other week. But in the wintertime, I leave it plugged in so I can keep it warm.
Yeah, Tesla is a little different in some respects. I think with most EVs, if you charge in the cold, it'll try and heat the battery pack to get more efficient charging. But that, of course, uses power, and that doesn't affect the range, but it does affect your energy bill. So, what I do is in the winter, I charge not every day, but as often as I need to. I plug in as soon as I get back, and the battery will already be warm from having driven. So it doesn't need to expend energy on that. But in the summer, when they're like high demand for electricity and you don't have the effect of the car having to heat the battery, I set it on delayed charge. So it starts charging at 2 a.m. when the demand is low. And that works well for me. So there are different strategies for this.
All right, we're going to move on to our next topic because we have more questions coming in. And I think this question is probably going to be best answered by Ivy, because I know you're the only one with the plug-in hybrid. What a plug-in hybrid means for folks who are curious is one that has an electric range but also has a gas backup. So this person asks if anyone has that type of car, and if so, what are the benefits?
Yeah, so I can definitely talk about the i3 Rex. I think it's different from what most people think of. Like, I feel like a lot of people think of a Prius or something like that, where you can actually watch it switching back and forth between using the engine and using the gas. I mean, using the gas and using the electric as you're sort of driving, and it's sort of going back and forth. And with the i3, it actually is using the gas to power a motor just to recharge the electrical system. So it's a little bit different in that it is always using the electrical system to drive the car. But either way, I feel like the benefits are kind of the same, which is just like a little bit of peace of mind. I think for me, it was I was dipping my toe into this, and I wanted to make sure that on these like long trips and going to New York that like I had some sort of backup. And so I feel like that's one of the things that's really nice about it is if you do go places and you have trouble finding a charger, or you haven't been able to plan, or something unexpected comes up, you always know then that you can put in some gas and have the car go a little bit longer, right? It's a little bit of a backup system. So I feel like that's one of the things that's really nice. Just for people who are like on the fence about it, I did a lot of hemming and hawing about that before I got my car. And I definitely, when the lease is up, I will probably go full electric. I appreciated it, and it was sort of a good transition, but I definitely don't feel like you have to have it. As you heard from the panel, there are lots of charging options and lots of charging stations out there, and more. But I'm sure it depends on where exactly you live, where you work, where you're headed to, all of that kind of stuff. But it did, like I said, it did sort of what it was intended to do, which is made the transition a little easier, like gave me a little peace of mind. Sometimes there'd be a road trip and I'd be nervous, and I could just put in a little gas. My car only has a 2-gallon tank, so it's not even, right? You put in a few dollars and you just gives you that little peace of mind to make sure that you'll get to your destination and can plug in when you get there. So I don't know, Devin, does that cover it, or were there any other things that you wanted to?
No, I think that's perfect. I just wanted to know how you felt about it. And sometimes they do talk about the plug-in hybrids kind of like as a gateway car. So like if you're not ready, then for sure it's a good way to start. Out of curiosity, what do you have your eye on for your next car?
I'm trying not to think about it yet. I decided to lease because I already knew, so it was the end of 2018, and the range on the 2019 cars was already significantly further than what I was looking at. So I knew by the end of the 3-year lease, I would be able to go a lot farther on a charge. But I still have a year and a few months left on my lease. So I haven't even started looking because I figure there'll be like something new and exciting out there once I get there. But I was listening to Peter mention that he's starting to think about next year, but I feel like there is sort of this change in terms of what's available, and we haven't really touched on this yet, but I did, when I was looking, I'd go to the Green Drive event and I'd hear about a car and I'd say, oh, that's interesting, and then I'd call the dealership and they'd be like, we might get one in a few months, right? So there is an availability issue. Like there are some dealerships and some manufacturers that are really excited about their cars, trying to sell them, and there are others that don't have them, aren't trying to get them out there. So it's just, that's another piece that we haven't really touched on yet, but there are lots of cars, but there are also differences in terms of what is really available.
That's true too. Yeah, I would encourage anyone who's thinking about these types of cars, if they're having a problem with inventory, to feel free to use the contact information on this webinar to reach out and ask me about it if you want. This webinar is going to be recorded, and my contact information is on it. So if anyone has any questions about that, but we are keeping our eye out on all the new cars that are coming out, because eventually I will get my own, but I'm still I'm looking for the best one that I want the most. Okay, so the next question is about cost of repairs and insurance compared to gas cars, so like maintenance costs and things like that. So Peter, I feel like I haven't heard enough of your voice today, so why don't you chime in?
That is a good point, because I watched a series from the UK called Fully Charged, and the person who runs it, who's a British actor, got one of the first Nissan LEAFs in 2010, and he still has it. So he's had it for 10 years, and he has spent literally zero amount in that time on maintenance. The only thing he's replaced are the tires, and the only other maintenance cost has been the windshield washer fluid. So this is very typical of EVs. And I'm leasing my LEAF, and they insist, in fact, they set up a little alarm every so many thousand miles. It tells me on the dashboard, you have to bring it in. And the only thing they do is rotate the tires. That's it. And for the first couple of times it was free, and now it costs me $25 to rotate the tires. And I wouldn't do that. I mean, people in Britain don't rotate tires. And I wouldn't do it. So maintenance is pretty much close to zero because there's nothing to maintain. And when I talk to people about maintaining electric vehicles, I say, well, you know, an electric vehicle has an electric motor in it, just like a refrigerator. And how often do you have to take your refrigerator into service? You don't. It just keeps going for years and years and years. There's no filters, no belts, no check engine lights, nothing. So there's nothing to maintain on electric cars. And I think Tesla now will let you go for a very long period before it requires you to bring the car in for maintenance. There's no reason to do it. So yeah, maintenance costs are practically zero. And there'll be wear items like tires and windshield wipers and stuff like that. But everything else, there's no, they just don't wear out.
Yeah. How about Xavier? Have you experienced any maintenance needs really, or any higher like insurance costs or anything?
Nope. Like I've only had the tires rotated, like Peter was talking about. Yeah, the zero maintenance so far. So for the past year, as far as insurance goes, it's pretty comparable. Yeah, no big swings as far as insurance costs go.
Okay, great. Okay, so I have another question. It says, I work on a street with a steep slope. I have a coworker with a Prius, and I've seen them struggle with spinning wheels if there's any snow on the ground. Do you guys have any similar experiences, or are your EVs better at navigating through snow?
My Bolt is good, but I am a firm believer in winter tires. So I always buy winter tires for all my cars. So that's how I rotate the tires is when the winter comes, I put the winter tires on and drive. But a lot of people just drive with the regular Bolts, Chevy's tires, and they seem to be fine in the snow. I live on a hill, and to get out of the driveway and then go directly up the hill is a little bit of work for any vehicle. So I would definitely a firm believer in winter tires.
Yeah, it's also going to depend on the drive system in the car. So a lot of EVs today are front wheel drive because they're either based on gas powered designs or they're like loosely based on them. Other EVs like some Teslas are rear wheel drive, and then you've got all wheel drive cars, which obviously will get better traction in the snow, whether they're EVs or gas powered cars.
The certain EVs come with low rolling resistance tires, which aren't as grippy. So depending on where you live, that could be an issue. I've not had any problems at all with the LEAF. It's the other thing that plus for electric vehicles is they come with hundreds of pounds of batteries. So you have this weight, and it's typically low down. I mean, the Bolt, certainly the LEAF, and I think also the Tesla, pretty much all of them have a slab of batteries, which weighs hundreds of pounds, right in the middle of the car below the driver. So the center of gravity is really low. And I've noticed also the ID4, the Volkswagen that's coming, that's rear wheel drive, and the i3 is rear wheel drive. And I think the old idea of having to have front wheel drive or four wheel drive is related to gasoline engine cars, because you have a big lump of an engine that has to be put somewhere, and typically it's at the front. So the weight distribution wasn't very good. If you have a front engine car with a rear wheel drive, there isn't a lot of weight over the rear. So front wheel drive, I think, was better. But I think with electric cars, because of this huge weight of battery, rear wheel drive seems to be coming back. And I have no idea. Actually, I looked at the i3 when I was looking for my second electric car, and that put me off. The i3 has very slim tires, and also is a very light car and has rear wheel drive. And I wasn't certain about that, but I don't know whether Eevee has had any issues in the snow.
No, I haven't. I was going to say, that's one of the things. It's a little bit like the question we had earlier about the charging in the winter, where people gave a lot of really helpful insight about sort of how the cars work. But just for someone who's like a layperson, I've never noticed anything that significantly impacted me in the winter, whether it's the charge or the tires or the rear wheel drive, or right. Like, the reality is the past 2 winters have been totally fine. So I think I haven't had my car in a really bad winter yet. So I still am a little bit like waiting to see if we really get dumped on, how does that rear wheel drive go? But so far so good, no problems.
Good to hear. Awesome. I have a couple more questions before we wrap up. And one of these is actually my questions. And I want to know, from your perspective, was it easy to file for the federal tax incentive and to get the state rebate if you were eligible for the More Eevee rebate with Massachusetts? Was that easy?
Yeah.
Yeah, the federal.
My issue with the federal tax thing is that the tax software I used was kind of confusing, and Tesla was in its drawdown period. So I had to enter the full amount, and then the software would reduce it. And if I'd entered the reduced amount knowing that it was reduced, then the software would have cut that in half and caused problems. But for Teslas, it's a non-issue anymore since we don't have the rebate for Teslas.
Yeah, you have to remember that it is a tax rebate, that you have to actually owe that amount in taxes.
Right, it's a credit.
Actually, if you lease, which is recommended because of the changes in battery technology are so rapid that you end up with a car that is in 3 years is pretty much out of date. But if you lease, they actually take that $7,500 off the price. So even if you don't have tax liability, you still get it if you lease. So that is another thing. Of course, introducing a bit of politics, Donald Trump wouldn't be able to benefit because he doesn't pay $7,500 in taxes. He only pays $750. So he wouldn't be able to benefit from an EV. Maybe that's why he doesn't drive. Couldn't resist that.
So the Massachusetts rebate thing was, I had poor timing, I thought, and then I was pleasantly surprised. In January of this year, they brought it back. And I just bought the car January 2nd. So that was great. Didn't know it was coming. A $2,500 check from the state was really great. Then later on, they got in touch with me. I bought the 2019 in November of 2019. And between September and January, there was no rebate. Then they sent me the state sent me a letter saying, we'll give you $1,500 for your rebate. I'm like, great. There's my money for charging the thing. So I was pleasantly surprised that I got that I qualified. So, but that's a check. And so that's better than a federal tax credit.
Yeah, John, I just caught the rebate like right before it was over in September. So I got the $1,500, but yeah, it's good to hear that it came back this past year.
They're
did have a
also
little,
giving it to you if you bought your car between September and the end of December last year now. That's when I got my Leaf Plus, and I just applied for that rebate. They're offering $1,500. So, and that's like, it's an easy, like you go to More Eevee, you fill out an application that takes 2 minutes. Then they give you 2 weeks to send them documentation that you will have, and it will not be hard to find. They want the purchase and sales agreement, your ID, and your registration. And so you get those scanned and you email them to them. And then if you are deemed eligible, your check comes in the mail.
I had a little bit of difficulty with the state in that when I filled out the form, they rejected it saying that I filled the form out too late, but the form wasn't available in January. It was available in February. So I'm an IT guy, so I know I can go back into the Wayback Machine on a website and find out. So I was pretty sure they didn't have the form available. So I was able to show them that you didn't post the form on your website in January, so therefore I couldn't fill out the form. And so just petitioning that, they came back and said, yeah, you're right, sorry about that, here's $2,500. So it was a little bit of difficulty, but the other, I mean, that's the third time I've received a rebate for an EV too. The other 2 times, so pretty easy.
Awesome. It's good to hear that you still got it. Just for folks that are attending the More Eevee rebate, I would encourage you, if you're a Massachusetts state resident, to look at the website. They're changing things a little bit. So right now, if you get a battery electric vehicle that it costs under $50,000, you're eligible for a $2,500 rebate. For a plug-in hybrid, it still has to be under $50,000, but you have to get more than 25 miles of range, and you get $1,500. So it's still a pretty good deal. For Rhode Island, we don't have a state rebate, as Peter knows. And for folks who are joining us from New York, if you go on NYSERDA's website, you can figure out what a car is eligible for there. I think we have 8 minutes left, so I'm going to just go with one last question. So what is something you wish you knew before buying your car?
I can jump in there if you like. I got the Nissan LEAF, which will do 150 miles even in the winter and a lot more in the summer. But soon after the second version of the LEAF came out, there were reports that it would only do rapid charging once in a day, and then the rapid charging slowed down dramatically. Somebody always tries to do a long trip in all these cars. And it turns out that the LEAF's battery is air cooled, which all electric car batteries create a lot of heat. And most of them, the Bolt, the Tesla, and I think the BMW have liquid cooling, but the LEAF doesn't. So to protect the battery from getting too overheated, they will only allow the car to rapid charge at a decent rate once a day. So I didn't know that, and I only just learned that quite recently. So I think you have to be aware of that. And I think most of the newer EVs now coming out all have what they call proper thermal management. The LEAF is the exception. So that's the one thing I wish I knew. Not that it's made a difference, because I don't take it long distances. I only actually have used a rapid charger maybe 2 or 3 times. But that's the one thing I would have liked to have known when I got it.
My wish I knew. My wish I knew thing is very Tesla specific, which is that Tesla keeps changing their details of what their cars are and their pricing and all that. And it can be very frustrating when you place an order for a car and then 2 weeks later you discover that they've changed the pricing and your car would have been, $1,000 less if you'd waited 2 weeks. And that's just an annoying thing about dealing with Tesla. However, I happen to kind of luck out in that I ordered at the right time. It's kind of a long tail and I won't bore people with it, but still it's it's useful to know what you're dealing with Tesla, and also actually something that would be more helpful if you're considering a Tesla is that the way they work, they try to deliver as many cars as possible in the quarter in which they're produced, and that's good for Tesla's finances. But the result is that you get the best deals on a Tesla late in the quarter, which would be right now, September, if you want to place an order today, would be the time to do it for a Tesla, or wait 3 months until the end of December. And if you place the order early in the quarter, then you're likely to wait for it because they're not going to be delivering new cars at that time. They're going to be shipping them off to Europe.
I can go next. I would just say that I think I did a lot of research and a lot of investigation and a lot of going to events from Drive Green and talking to dealerships and test driving and making sure it was a good decision. And just, it's easy. Like, it's not that different from any other car. It's not that. So I guess I would just say, like, I wish I had known that it wasn't as big of a decision as it felt like at the time. And then I'll do a second one if that's okay, Devin. Just the other thing is just that how many people are interested in hearing about it. I think I didn't realize how influential it is just for people to have an electric car and be able to tell people, the number of questions my mom's friends ask her about my electric car, right? People who just think that it's not a possibility or that it's super complicated or that it's not right for them, I think is really changed most dramatically by just regular people having an electric car. So just those would be the things I would say, is just that it's not as big a deal as it seems. We all tend to use all this jargon and talk about our EVs and ICs and kilowatts and all kinds of stuff, but it really isn't that intimidating once you actually get the car. It is really just like having any other car.
I think that's an important point, so I'm glad you brought that up. I think it can be a little intimidating. All right, ET, you're on the spot.
Okay. So I guess I wish I knew about winter driving a little bit more. I did sort of know about it, but I guess there was just no way for me to understand it until I experienced it. Like I said, I regularly drive 50 miles to my parents' house in New Hampshire. And so I can kind of watch how that journey changes. And in the winter, I can see that I definitely get diminished range. I can see that, but all that it wouldn't have changed my buying decision, because then you kind of you learn how to drive differently, you learn how to plan differently. Because I also noticed that if I was being a lead foot that's a problem. That I was making my car have poor range. So I mean, that might be the one thing that I wish I kind of knew beforehand, but it wouldn't have changed my buying decision. I also wish I kind of really understood how wonderful one-pedal driving is beforehand, because I heard about one-pedal driving and it sounded intimidating. One-pedal driving is basically the e-pedal. You can turn it on in your Eevee if you want, and when you take your foot off the accelerator, the car's thing is to slow down and stop, not to just kind of keep going. And that is wonderful. It is so much safer. It is so much, it's efficient, it's regenerative. It's just great. And I love it. And I love it in a way that is joyful and happy. I just really love one-pedal driving. So that's how we drive now. And I wish I just would have gotten an Eevee sooner if I knew things like that and lots of other wonderful things about my car.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, Xavier. You're up.
Yeah, what ET said is a game changer. Whenever you switch back, it's oh, I have to move my foot from one pedal to the other.
Too much work.
I feel spoiled whenever I switch to a different car. But anyway, I guess I'll be like cheesy with this one. Like the thing that I wish I knew was Green Consumers website. Like I wish I had that. I wish I knew of that resource when I was first like looking into an EV, because I had to do a lot of the research like on my own and kind of figure everything out. Just kind of just on my own. So it was like learning about like Green Consumers like website and all the information that y'all have is like, if I had that at the beginning, like everything would have been a lot smoother. So
Now you know, even if it's after the fact. Okay, John, want to close us out?
Sure. I think I did a lot of research before I got the EV, but the first EV I got in, I said it was the e-Golf, and that was a surprise when I got behind the wheel, and it was so quiet. I expected an electric car to make kind of a whirring noise, like a high-pitched sound, but both the Golf and the Bolts are so quiet. You can have a phone conversation in the car over Bluetooth and not have to say what, as long as nobody's buzzing by you with a Harley Davidson or something like that. It's very quiet. You can listen to music while you're driving. You don't have to jack up the volume on a podcast to hear things. I just love the quietness.
Great. That's a good way, I think, to wrap things up. Just for folks who are attending, there's some couple of resources for you. So if you'd like, you can visit our website, greenenergyconsumers.org/drivegreen, to learn more about EVs. You can take the pledge, which is something where if you are not ready to drive electric yet, you can pledge that your next car will be electric, and we'll stay in touch with you to let you know what's coming up and what you should be looking out for. Or you can join our Facebook community group. It's called the Drive Green Community Group, where we're trying to foster more of a sense of community and have people, easily ask questions of one another and share EV-related news. So with that, thank you all for joining, and a special thanks to our panelists today. Thank you so much for your time, and have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Happy
Bye.
National Drive Electric Week.
all right, thanks everyone.